What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Malik Washington back at it again with another episode of Breaking Mental Barriers. Hope everyone is well this fine day or evening, wherever you all reside. I pray for you all strength, hope, and courage during these troublesome and turbulent times, and that everything will go your way the way that you want it to. If it doesn't, that's fine. Just, pray for understanding, pray for resolve to, get to understand the things that aren't going your way will go your way for the better, right? And if it's not obviously the intended plan that you set out to achieve for yourself. Sometimes in life we make plans, the plans don't go our way, but that's okay. In the end, whatever is meant for you will happen at its appointed time, and you will either grow, you will be either or broken or fallen in order to regrow and be a different person so that you can look at life with a different lens. But I want to dive right on into the topic, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are again, yet again, talking about another individual who's clearly being lambasted for basically promoting a documentary that is considered to be controversial, and yet again, the J community, right? Y'all know him by the name of Kyrie Irving. Obviously, most people know Kyrie Irving, so I don't even have to make an introduction of the man, but you all obviously know that he is drafted into the NBA, blah, 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 on that regard. I find it interesting. Yet again, this is the same group, small group, that is yet treated again like an endangered species. That if you say one thing about them in error, you're going to get canceled and you're going to get extremely criticized to the point where you will get doxxed and pretty much they will get you fired or canceled, you name it. Now, understandably, if you're working up under them, I can see them firing you because you said something that goes against their entire group. Obviously, they don't like it. And if said person who owns a particular infrastructure has something to say about it because they heard of it through rumor or by personal experience of hearing you, and they feel triggered by what you say, they do have a right and they are entitled to fire you or let you go because you're clearly not listening to them and you're not under their rule. You're not following their rules. However, here's my thing, right? So there's a documentary that came out years ago called From Hebrews to Negroes. I think it was by a man by the name of Robert Dalton. In my Hebrew Israelite days, I actually had heard about this documentary. I know a couple of brothers in that particular video, that particular documentary, and the intentions of making the documentary obviously was with good intent. It was with the intention of educating and edifying people of color, specifically Black people, about their connection to the Israelites, right? Many of you, millions of you who may have came across Israelites on the streets, or you may have heard about Israelites on YouTube videos who have podcasts, or, they sit in their homes and they study and talk and teach the Bible. You might have heard of these different groups. And obviously they believe that they are descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel by faith and by some historical verifications based off of what certain African groups have claimed back in Africa, right? It has been assumed based off of certain scriptures and verses in the Bible that there are many indications based off of personality, ethnic markers, migrational patterns, you name it, that there is the possibility that people of color can be descendants of the ancient Israelite people, in which there's not an issue with that, right? And so many of you can associate that same mentality towards Black people believing that they're Muslims, or Black people believing that they are Rastafarians, or Black people believing that they don't even come from Africa at all, but rather that they are Moors and they descend from the Americas here, because there were people of color that were here prior to European colonization, all that jazz, right? Nothing wrong with trying to, in my humble opinion, there's nothing wrong with trying to find out who you are. And I think what non-black people, what I want non-black people to understand, even if you don't, but you can listen. I think sometimes you need to take a little bit, you need to have a little bit of compassion in the sense that this is a group of people that have lost their identity coming across from Africa to North America. And it's not like white people in slavery practiced the ability to allow slaves to be able to keep and ascertain their cultures. When they got here, many slave masters chose to change names, teach the English language, prevent black people from reading and writing, prevent them from being able to associate with one another through their own particular home or native languages, not to mention get rid of their entire ethnic being as humans, right? Some of these people could have came from the Igbo tribe, Gadambe, Falacia, Yoruba, you name it. They may have come from whichever tribes. And I'm sure many of us, including myself, have come from one of these Western sub-Saharan West African countries, no doubt about it. But what has happened is they don't have this identity. And something is wrong in that regard. Naturally, as time progresses, the descendants are going to start looking for some type of belonging to a group, right? And so that's why you will notice a lot of African Americans who are descendants of slaves, they will resort to going towards Islam. They will resort to going towards Christianity. Part of that has to do with the fact that we were forced into it. Other parts, it could be because, back in Africa, some Christianity did already exist prior to colonization. But in the instance of the slaves themselves, we were taught it by coercion in order to prevent us from being able to rebel against our masters, because the masters misquoted and misconstrued certain passages in there that they believed were referring to slaves obeying masters, or AKA in this case, white people who were the masters over blacks during that time. So what you have in this instance is a lot of black people are trying to claim identities, right? Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. X was representing like an unknown last name because they don't know where they come from. So X was in representation of that in the black Islamic culture. Hebrew Israelites changed their names to Yisrael because it was assumed that if they are from one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the last names would technically be where they originated from. You know, how like the Jewish community has their different last names. And in my case, I had Malachi ben Yisrael, or Malachi, son of Israel, if you want to put it back into English terms. So ultimately, the reason why you see this constant need to verify who we are is because we're trying for certain sects of black people who have lost their identities throughout the diaspora. They are trying to find it. And if helping to create a documentary helps them to get closer to that, then why not? But where Jewish people have the problem is that there are some errors in that documentary that isn't necessarily entirely true. There are things in there that probably references Jews that they don't agree with, and henceforth is the reason why a lot of Jewish people are speaking out against this documentary. As a matter of fact, they've had issues with this for years. It's not like this documentary is anything new. Hebrews to Negroes has been out for a minute. Kyrie Irving just so happened to come across it, right? And it's not a surprise. The Hebrew Israelites have been around for a long time. People have just ignored them because they repeat the same rhetoric over and over every time you hear them out in the streets. But now that a celebrity came out, or particularly an entertainer came out, a ball player came out and actually shared the post, somehow it's now controversial, right? And this always happens with celebrities and entertainers, you name it. because they're the big bucks, because they're the rich ones, because they're the ones that's taking the most out of the system. Some people don't like the fact that they're going out of their comfort zone to now express some type of interest in other things outside of their occupation or their incumbency. So what you see with Kyrie Irving is the same nonsense you saw with Kanye West. They don't want him to speak. They don't want him to speak. They don't want him to have an opinion. They just want him to ball. My whole thing is this, right? Kyrie Irving should be able to, once again, as I said in my previous video about Kanye, he should be able to have a criticism. He should be able to even share a post that you don't agree with. I can't tell you how many documentaries come out on Netflix and they're not always 100% correct. The purpose of documentaries is for our learning as people. Whoever wishes to watch it, whoever wishes to consume it, you don't have to consume it. You don't have to watch it, but you choose to watch it. You choose to consume it. It doesn't matter how you may feel. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, but more so is the documentary giving you a perspective enough to want to dig into this research and find out if they're right or wrong. Just like the Jewish community made the sentiment, it's an error. There are a lot of errors in there. Okay, and that's your opinion. The documentary is an opinion that provides what they believe are the facts. If you can't provide otherwise, then why are you making the criticism? If you can't defend otherwise, why are you making the criticism? Why are you trying to cancel someone for even sharing the ideal? I'm sure you guys share things all the time. You're not always 100% correct on everything that you share, but people can go and they can look at it and they can say to themselves, I either agree or I disagree with this notion, or I disagree with this movie. I disagree with this documentary. Was it not too long ago that when Viola Davis created Woman King, everybody, black, white, Asian, you name it, was coming out saying this is not correct, trying to make the Dahomey tribe appear as if they were trying to fight against not only colonialism, but the aspect of slavery, when in reality, the Dahomey tribe was the very first slave trading tribe in Africa that was promoting the slave trade, human trafficking at that. That was their main source of income. They believed in that wholeheartedly. So much so the Europeans actually were trying to stop them from doing it because they believed in it so much. And the hell they gave their slaves, inhumane as hell. And y'all want to talk about Europeans, Africans did the same thing to their own. But there's so much outcry for reparations, but from the very people who started it. The first man, the original man, as we all love to say in the pro-black community, the original man is the one that began slavery and to begin with. But we're not holding him accountable. We're doing the same nonsense. And we didn't cancel her when she created that movie. We didn't cancel her. We had strong criticisms of it. Everyone came out with their little videos through TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, you name it. Everybody spoke their minds. They gave their criticisms. And that was it. That was it. She got her millions of dollars from the box office. Suddenly, Kyrie Irving one post about a documentary that y'all don't agree with. And all of a sudden, here we go. Now we got to get on him, because he hasn't learned his lesson. We got to whip him into shape, because clearly he didn't learn from Kanye. Ladies and gentlemen, especially those of you who are Americans, I don't expect people who are maybe perhaps foreigners and aren't necessarily a part of our culture to understand free speech, because in your country, you might not have grew up with that. Or some of you do believe in free speech, but you can't say it because of the type of dynamic your government is ran on. But for us as Americans, this should be an extreme problem. And the reason why I say this is because every day that you get up, you have the ability, think about it like this. I know everyone doesn't agree with the Constitution, and a lot of people probably want a lot of things in the Constitution extracted, and some things need to be annexed, or things need to be reformulated or changed. But you get to get up every day and you get to actually express how you feel about your presidents, your secretaries of state, your bosses, your managers, your parents. You get to get up every day and have an opinion about something. Whereas some people, if they give an opinion, it's off with their heads. Or you get to go, you go to jail. Back in ancient times, you probably got crucified. You probably got stoned to death. You probably got tortured to death, especially if you were living in the Spanish Inquisition and you had a different opinion as a Protestant as opposed to a Catholic who was inflicting pain on Protestants for believing otherwise about God. And yet in today's time, you have the ability to get on your phone, scroll, look at a source of information, whether if it's right or wrong, you can share it, and everyone has the ability to critique it, which is the beauty about the internet in and of itself, but just the beauty of being able to speak in general. And yet some of you, especially those in the Jewish community, you all want to shut people down and get rid of them and say that they're anti-Semitic. I don't think it's anti-Semitic to have an appropriate view about your culture, right? Everybody may not necessarily agree to the different ideas of Judaism. That doesn't necessarily make them anti-Semitic because of it. Okay, the Hebrews to Negroes documentary has some errors in it that you don't necessarily find to be truthful or correct in form, but it's still but yet and still that doesn't make the people who made the documentary anti-Semitic. Nobody's talking about killing Jews. Nobody's talking about destroying Jewish lives. They're just saying they're adding themselves to the fold. I believe that our people descend from these people, and here's why. They're making their case, just like you would make the case of how they're not. But let's be quite honest. Even some Jewish rabbis, and I've heard them myself, have even admitted that some African groups do genetically have some type of ties to the ancient Israelites. We can't knock this. They've done DNA testing on some of these groups. Some of these groups have practiced these traditions, your so-called traditions, for over 1,000 years, even prior to the enslavement of some African groups that came over here to the Americas. Now, even though I've gotten off of the Israelite train, I am not going to sit here and just simply hop on the bandwagon of being an apologist for the Jewish community, because the Jewish community can't seem to handle a difference of opinion. And I'm not talking about all of you. I'm talking about the ones that seem to have a problem with Kyrie Irving sharing something as simple as a post regarding Jews. Once again, this isn't me coming at talking about him in regards to his belief about the Israelites. That's his personal opinion. That's his path. He has to figure things out for himself. He has to go through that journey and understand whether if black people descend from them or not. That's his prerogative. I'm arguing on behalf of his ability to speak his mind. He can speak. He should not have to be subjected to consequence because of his opinion about something. And at the end of the day, if he believes this is where he comes from, he's entitled to that. He's entitled to believe that. And it may very well be true. And if it is true, are you going to deny him of his birthright? If it is true of any African American or Africans across the diaspora that could potentially or actually descend from them, because not every black person is a descendant of a Hebrew Israelite. Let me also express that disclaimer. Not every black person in the world is a descendant of the Israelites. They may have some type of biblical ties to one of the three uncles of the human race, according to the scriptures. But not everyone is an Israelite or Semite. Nonetheless, if he has, or any of the other people in the diaspora have some type of connection to the ancient Jews, I think they have a right to express that. And you cannot take that away from them. And that's why a lot of times they feel like they're being pushed back or marginalized or being treated like as if they're some kind of a spectacle to be laughed at because a lot of people prevent them from asking questions. It's almost like you can't try to figure out who you are. And if you do, you got all these people, these non-black people coming along, and they're trying to shut you down and tell you what you can and can't say, what you can and can't express. You just have to be this American black person. And you can't say whether if your heritage may possibly go back to these people. Now, don't get me wrong. African Americans, at the end of the day, we are an admixture of a lot of different cultures. Ultimately, part of it is due to slavery and going on later on. So, of course, black people have intermingled with, Europeans. So there's a lot, and there are other different races. So there's a lot of different admixtures. African Americans are not just one lineage. They're not purely black or any of that. They lost that the minute they came over here on the ships. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we have the right to say what we think is right or wrong. You are not the harbingers of information. We're becoming a country where we think we can dictate what people should believe is true and what they believe should not be true. That should be according to each and every individual based off of the research or lack of research that they're doing in order to determine whether something is true or false. We act as if we're treating adults like literal children, like as if they can't decide whether something is true or false. It's the same thing with what the Democrats were doing back in 2020 when COVID-19 was happening. And they kept saying everything the Republicans and libertarians and independents were saying was misinformation. And in the name of misinformation, we're going to keep fact checking every little thing that you say. We're going to keep on keeping you accountable because we want you to agree to everything that mainstream media as well as the CDC are saying. And we're doing the same thing to people like Kanye and Kyrie. We don't want them to say what is relative, what could be potentially true or false in nature, and not allowing the American people to decide whether what they're saying is true or not. Now, it should not, mind you, it should not take a celebrity to tell you what's true or false. People need to do the research themselves so that they can also disseminate information out here. It should not take Kanye West and Kyrie Irving to tell you what is true or what is false. Because everybody is going their own way, celebrities included. I don't care if they're in Christianity, Islam, Hebrew Israelites, or secular, you name it. Everybody has to decide what is right or wrong for themselves. If they're not looking for God, then they're definitely looking to just be true, something to be true or to be honest or to be direct. But we're just going to cancel them too, because they have an opinion. So Kyrie Irving is basically being X'd off. Because once again, the Jays, the Godfather themselves, they want to X him out because he shared something that had errors in it. Can't tell you how many documentaries have came out about different historical events, things and people, and they didn't have all the information correct. And yet and still nobody canceled them for it. Plenty of them on Netflix. Plenty of them on other different social media sites too. But nobody's canceling them. We got to do better. We have to want to do better. And if we don't, then the country's right to free speech, the right to speak at all, is going to hell in a handbasket. But that's all I have to say about that. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malik Washington. I thank you for listening. If you got this far, stay tuned until the next video. And with this, I say peace.